because we have great news about the taxonomy project. So let's go straight into it. For those that don't know what a taxonomy project is, it's just universal classification of services. Villages across the country give services different names that are local to their communities. But if we have kind of a universal definition of that service, this universal taxonomy, then we can add up the numbers. So that's kind of quick, very quick definition. But taxonomy, if you don't know what a taxonomy is, let us know because we have some content for that. We presented this at the conference basically with Capitol Hill Village. So if you were at the conference, maybe you have seen some of these slides, but they're so important that I need to go over those. First thing that I wanted to say is that we fiercely protect your data. So we have obviously villages across the country, and we think their data is super important. And that, for that reason, we are very careful with this data sharing taxonomy project, where we think each village can contribute a tiny bit of their data. So it's just not, they're not opening up all their database to this project, but just a tiny bit, just maybe how many services have been done last month, and that's it. And that's enough to provide a ton of value to this taxonomy project. The other thing that is important is that if you decide to participate in the taxonomy project, you contribute a tiny bit of your data, and also you're protecting the privacy of your villagers. So there is no personal data that is shared, no names, no emails, no phones, no addresses, etc. It's just overall numbers, and that don't put in danger the privacy of your members. Once again, here I would say that helpful villages are, I think it's our job and responsibility to firstly protect the village data. So we have set up a multi-level authorization process to ask villages that want to participate in the taxonomy project. So it looks a little bit like this. We presented this at the conference also. Like for each one of our customers that you can see there, we have a spreadsheet file, and we ask them, well, did we send them an email about the taxonomy project? Did they authorize? Yes. Did they authorize us to share the names of their service categories? Yes or no? Their event categories? Yes or no? Did we send it to Capitol Hill for classification? Yes or no? Did Capitol Hill mapped the local services to the taxonomy? Yes or no? When we have a classification, we enter that into the helpful village database for that specific village, and then we ask people if they accept to contribute their numbers, their count of services to the regional taxonomy report. So it's not just about, oh yeah, I want to participate, and then we just do a big mix and match of your data. It's like we go with you each step of the way and asking you if you're okay sharing this tiny bit of data. So we think this authorization and having the village decide what happens with that little tiny bit of data is super important. And that has brought us to the big news, which is that the taxonomy project, the taxonomy report actually exists today. So I'm going to be showing today during the presentation what the taxonomy project looks like. So it's not just a description as we have done in the past, but I'll be actually showing the actual document. So that's for in a couple of seconds, I think. Right after this slide, which is, do you guys want to see the taxonomy report? I hope so, because we have been talking about this for a long time. And actually I wanted to say that we have done a DC taxonomy report that is available to the executive directors of the DC villages, actually. Now, why DC? Well, just because they started, basically. So Capitol Hill did a lot of work around the classification of services. And then we have today 11 villages in the District of Columbia that are using our system, that agreed to this, that have authorized each one of the steps of the taxonomy project. So sharing their event services, their event categories, they agreed to share the count of their services to the report, and that it would be shared with the other DC villages. So that's great. Now, I will not be sharing their report because that, as I was saying before, we are super protective of the privacy. So the DC group has their taxonomy report, but I'll not be showing it to you today because it's their data. But what I will do is that I can show you the report, how it looks like on some sort of an example, dummy example with different data that is not DC. So I have here a PDF file that I'm going to show you. And in this example, is using Los Angeles, and it's not; those are not real villages. So don't worry about this data for those villages. Like none of those villages exist. But I wanted to show you how the report is structured. So I'm going to get out of the presentation. I need to move my windows around because I need to find my PDF Acrobat Reader. There we go. And here it is. And then let me just maximize this report. Okay, here we go. So it looks like this, right? We say taxonomy report for this period of time, which is essentially 1 year. And then we can do different aggregation. In this case, I said before we had the DC aggregation of villages. Here is the Los Angeles aggregation of villages, which means that at this date, we produce this report for a number of villages that all agreed to participate in this report. So this is Acton Village, Corona Village, Fillmore, Irvine, Malibu, Oxnard, Palmdale, Pomona, Santa Clarita, Torrance, and Torrance Village. Anyways, so what's interesting here is that they are all, in this example, helpful village customers, they all agreed to participate in the taxonomy report, and they all agreed to put their numbers together. So if we do that, we can generate a number of charts. The first one that we show here is the number of members and the number of volunteers, right? And basically, we have here a chart and a table saying, okay, 1 year ago there was 2,300 members, and then the next month, and the next month, and the next month, and then last month we had 2,800 members. So two things that I wanted to show here is that, well, we see the chart how a collection or a group or a region of villages is evolving, though that's interesting all in it by itself. The other thing that I found super interesting is that now we have bigger numbers, right? So each village, so maybe one village can have 100 members, or let's say 200 members, and it's interesting if you go to talk to your mayor. But maybe if we're going to talk to the governor or something, well, we want to show numbers that are as big as possible to be, received and listened with more attention. So obviously, if we are adding up the members of a collection of villages, we end up with numbers that are way bigger. So for example, in this example, it would be good to go to the Los Angeles mayor and say, well, we are serving all the different villages in our area. We're serving 2,800 members. So now suddenly it's like, wow, that's a big number. We have 970 volunteers. So it's like, I wanted to show that if we add up the numbers of all villages, these numbers get more impressive, right? So, okay, that's the taxonomy report, number of members and volunteers, how they evolve over time. Now we have the taxonomy description of the services that have been done by all these villages. So we have 5 aggregation layers of services that are provided by village. So this is the Capitol Hill taxonomy. So they did the classification saying, well, of all the services that are done by villages, we can classify them in all these 5 categories. So house and home support, independent support, transportation, volunteer engagement, wellness support, etc. And then basically what we're doing here from Helpful Village is that we're adding up the number of services. So we can say that house and home support, we have done 800. And then here we have done 14,000, almost 15,000 rides. So same principle as before, like now, because we are adding up these numbers, suddenly these numbers are quite big, right? So we can go to, let's say, the governor of the state and say, well, we have done 37,000 services. So now suddenly like, wow, you're an important group because you're doing a lot of work in the community. So we calculate 2 things. One is the number of services completed, and the other thing is the number of hours served, because each one of these services, right, takes some time. So we are adding up the number of services and the number of hours for each one of these categories. One thing that is easy to do once we have this table is that we can do a pie chart, right? And then from here, we can understand what are the villages in our area doing. And then from this, in this example, would be 40% of that is transportation, 37% of this is wellness support, 19% of this is independent support, etc. Okay, so that's already interesting. If we keep going down, basically we'll see now a breakdown of these categories, which is kind of bigger categories, house and home support. Each one of these categories is broken down into subcategories. So if we go down to the next page, we see house and home support actually is subclassified in these other services that are home systems maintenance and repair indoor, house and yard maintenance outdoor, etc. And then we have the same thing, count of services, hours served for those, and the evolution over time for each one of those. And then a pie chart for this subcategory, and same thing for each subcategory. So basically here is independent support, and these are different services that are with their names in the taxonomy. We're adding up the numbers. Same thing for transportation, where we are showing the numbers for different types of transportation. It can be transportation for driving, nutrition and groceries, for driving health and medical, driving other costs, and then we're adding up the numbers. So, and then same thing as we go down with the other categories. So there were 5 aggregation layers. So we do the report for the 5. Next step from this report is that we're working now on the classification of the event categories. So we don't have them. Actually, this is something we're working on with Capitol Hill about how to come up with different categories that could apply across the nation. But this is basically the report that is now available, that is called this taxonomy report, where we can add up the numbers of the impact of a collection of villages. Now I need to find my browser, because we're going to keep on going with the presentation. So we're back. Okay, perfect. So now, what does this mean for you? Because we're talking about DC and Los Angeles. But one thing that we wanted to mention here is that the report is now available by region for the whole nation. So we started with this red box that you see there for DC. So we're adding up the number of 11 villages in DC. But now the technique, the tech is ready to do any aggregation of other regions, right? So immediately, for us, it's technically very easy to say, okay, we can do a taxonomy report for a regional report of California. Okay, well, if you want to do that, then we're technically ready to get that done. Or maybe you want to do another region, could be New Mexico or Massachusetts or Ohio. And all those are really possible, because that's the good thing with technology, right? Once you do it once, it's very easy to do it, the second and third time around. So the taxonomy report for DC exists. If we have village leaders or regional meetings in any of these areas, and they say, okay, yeah, I think we can talk to our other neighboring villages if they want to have aggregate numbers, and then you can talk to your neighboring villages or regional leaders, and then talk to us, and we will be happy to come up with another aggregation. We will do the same process. Kind of, we need to go through the authorization. It's like, imagine that we're talking about the Ohio villages. We would need to hear from all the kind of directors of the villages, let's say 5 or 6. I think we have 6 or 7 there in Ohio. And if they're all okay on adding up their numbers and contributing to this report, they need to send us an email, and then we're good. And then, okay, then the Ohio taxonomy report exists. And once we have all these regions, obviously it's very easy. It's as easy actually to do an aggregation for the whole nation. And if we do add up the number for the whole nation, obviously the numbers are even bigger. Maybe we can say we're helping, let's say, I don't know, 25 or 30,000 members. And then if we set up a meeting with I don't know, Joe Biden, because I think he has some free time next week, we could tell him how much people and how many services the movement is doing. So he may potentially want to provide some money. Now, one thing we wanted to make clear is that it's super easy to participate. Our customers know this, because basically Helpful Village is basically most of the work, and you can participate in this project without effort. So there is the only effort there is that you need to send us the authorization. We want to make sure that we're doing something that you're comfortable with. If you don't want to participate, well, then you don't, and that's fine with us. But if you want to participate, Helpful Village takes care of all the hassle of saying, well, how do we do the classification with the Capitol Hill taxonomy? How do we enter the code so that we can classify the number on the national denomination or the universal denomination of services? You don't need to go through all that hassle. We can take care of that for you. Now, if you want to participate, Christina is the main person here. So you can always email Christina at helpfulvillage.com. She's managing the whole authorization cycle. Then these are the things, the authorizations that we're currently handling. It's the name of your service categories, name of the event categories, and also the service count and event participation count. So we may go back to you if you want to authorize some of these additional steps. I wanted to say that we have, I think in the last count, we had more than 50 villages participating in the project already at some level, and adding to the classification of services. So, so we think it's super important to do this project. So that was the update for the taxonomy report. I don't know, Chris, is there a question or something?
Yeah, can the date range be changed?
So not in this first version, right? Like, as we always do, is like this is the first version we came up with, and we definitely are looking forward to receiving some additional feedback. and potentially adding, kind of date ranges or other things. So we take that as a useful feedback, and we can consider that for a second version. So that keeps evolving, right? I mean, we always proceed in a similar way, right? We open up new features and new spaces with a simple version of the report as we just showed, and then we listen to other ideas to make it better. So this is version 1, but we can improve it over time. Okay.